Global Governance Institute, so people have it there. So just 1 second.
Uh,
Hello. Uh,
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our newest episode of Seta Tech Talks. My name is Erman Akıllı.
and I'm Gloria Shkurti Özdemir. Thank you for joining us today in our 12th episode of Seda Tech Talks. And today we are going to talk a very timely issue and with a very esteemed expert in this area and a colleague of ours, Mr. Medlir Mema. He's joining us from the US right now, and we are very glad to have him here with us today.
Without further ado, I would like to give a brief information about Mr. Mema, and then we are going to address him our very spicy questions relating with the current situation in the United States. But let's start with a brief biography of Mr. Mema. He was an associate professor of political science at the Tokyo International University in Japan. And he is the co-founder and the co-host of the Age of AI podcast. He is researching topics related to the impact of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and global governance. Mr. Mema, thank you for accepting our invitation and being so kind to attending our episode today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining. Well, we are going to delve about what's going on with the Trump's administration. But before mentioning about that, before delving to that, we would like to ask you about the Biden's administration's latest move related with the new regulation of the export of the GPUs. Um, they wanted to try to control of the export of those kind of semiconductors which are used by for doing the research and development process for the cutting edge technologies, most importantly for the artificial intelligence technologies. So by doing so, how do you evaluate this kind of attempt? Shall we read this kind of step as US is trying to control the way of technology in the worldwide, or what's the main and core reason for doing something like that? Because since by this step they announced a tiered system, they defined tier one, tier two, and tier three, and for this each classified tiers, they're going to export those kind of semiconductors in a different level. And
Yeah.
for some, like the tier three, there's no semiconductors at all. So
Correct.
let's hear about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, thank you for the invitation and congratulations on this series of programs. I think very topical and very timely subject and conversation. So again, thank you. Just with regards to, excuse me, with regards to your question, yes, in the last days of the Biden administration, President Biden, in fact, issued a series of rules and regulations with regards to artificial intelligence, or rather, that would have an impact on further development of AI, as well as U.S. role in the world with regards to AI. Of course, it did so understanding that it would have absolutely no control over how these kinds of rules and these kinds of orders would be implemented. In fact, the framework for AI diffusion, which is the order that you are referring to, is intended to be applied within 120 days or no sooner than 120 days. Clearly, totally under the purview of the Trump administration. And so the question is, why something like this now? Now, there's a couple of things here. One is we can look at the political aspect, and then we can look at kind of like a U.S. long-term AI ambitions. Politically, the Biden administration was very keen to tie the hands of the Trump administration. Trump had already signaled that, in fact, they were going to roll back as many of the both AI and otherwise orders, especially the ones that were based on executive orders by the previous administration. It turns out that as we'll discuss, he has done so in many cases. But the Biden administration wanted to kind of lock him in a particular trajectory, right? And in a way, this particular framework for AI diffusion is set up to appeal to Trump as well as to his kind of way of thinking. But at the same time is in line with what Biden actually has been doing all along. Don't forget that this particular initiative, the framework for AI diffusion, was released about the same time as another order that the Biden administration issued that would provide incentives to big tech companies, provide land, as well as building construction with the goal of setting up data centers throughout the United States by 2027. So have them start in 25, constructed, or at least all the permits done by 25, the end of 25, and then by end of 27, these data centers would be operative. So this is part of a holistic approach. But like I said, politically, this is kind of the incentive. Speaking to colleagues of mine that were working in the White House, many of them were concerned about what a Trump administration would mean with regards to AI. So they try to build into and institutionalize as many of these procedures, as many of these priorities they had as possible. Now, the second part of that has to do with U.S. long-term interests. The United States, just like other great powers, China in this case, and others, Russia and others, is very much interested in having a first mover advantage when it comes to artificial intelligence, especially with, as you pointed out, cutting edge technologies. The ramifications are huge, both in the area of weapons development and battlefield development, but as well as economic development. Whoever gets to this kind of holy grail of AI with this cutting edge graphic cards, graphic chips, would in fact have an advantage economically, politically, and militarily. And so this is not surprising. The United States would be interested in pursuing something like this. The fact that the way it has been done, we can get to the criticism about both allies like Turkey, but as well as industry leaders like NVIDIA, who feel like they're being hamstrung by this. But let's get to the details of this. What is the framework for AI diffusion? What it is a twofold strategy on the part of the Biden administration, and now it looks like maybe the Trump administration will pick it up. They have expressed themselves favorably in terms of that, but they're also going to review it. And so it has a two-part one. Part number one is the United States wants to dominate the development of AI cutting edge chips. To do so, it needs to have buyers, not just in the United States, but in a way have developed some kind of monopoly and control in the market throughout the world. Right. So one aspect of this is the economic aspect, the incentive to lead and develop, to lock into these contracts, countries and companies throughout the world. But then on the other hand, there is the ongoing competition with China, with Russia, right? The sanctions that are going on with Russia. And so the need for controlling the diffusion of these types of technologies throughout the world in a way that it would not impact negatively U.S. allies, but at the same time, and its economic interest, but at the same time, it would not allow China to be able to build an economic advantage on the back of U.S. AI developed and technologies. And so those are the two kind of balancing priorities that the Biden administration had in mind. And the way it did this is by basically instituting, as you pointed out, a three-tier system. One that basically looks at separates between trusted ally, strategic allies, and of course, restricted nations. Now, the trusted allies, turns out there's only 18 of them. Only 18 countries, France, Great Britain, Germany, and a few others that are in this trusted ally one, where the United States, in a way, has no limits in terms of the amount of these chips that it's selling to these to companies as well as governments within these countries. Where it gets a bit more interesting is the second tier. And the second tier is where countries like Turkey, who are in the NATO but somehow don't make the cut as trusted allies. Israel is in this category as well. And the rationale from the Biden administration is that the reason why they're doing this is because there are certain practices within these countries, the copyright protections. There have been some suspicion that perhaps some of this technology has leaked towards China and Russia and other countries in the last 3-4 years. And so it cannot be trusted. So the initial batch, right, the limit that these companies within these countries can purchase is up to 50,000 chips of these more so advanced ones, right? The latest technology chips. However, that can go up to 100,000 if, in fact, you can have government-to-government assurances, some best practices, streamlining, as well as industry-to-industry kinds of reassurances. So if industry can actually play by certain rules that are imposed by the United States, a new form of Washington consensus, if you will, then you can get this up to 100,000. And there are some, if governments are willing to make some more radical reforms, or even industry leaders in this case, it can go up to 320,000, right? So there are possibilities, but that's where, in a way, this balancing priorities comes in. The United States wants to sell as many of these chips as possible, but it wants to do this in as safe a way as possible. And of course, the last category, the one that is completely restricted, are the ones like China and Russia and others, where the United States does not want them to receive any of these, any of this technology, because then they would have an advantage, or they would use it for military battlefield applications or economic development. The United States wants to have the upper hand in this particular case.
Thank you.
Thank you, Medlir.
Sure.
Moving a little bit to the Trump administration, a lot happened since his first speech, where TikTok was mentioned, and on the other, after a couple of days, he also mentioned about the 500 billion technology and innovation fund, which has a direct emphasis on advanced artificial intelligence development. But at the same time, it brought to the fore the importance of the big tech companies, let's say. So what are your thoughts about this? Like, how do you see, and what potential effects might it have, not only on the US technological dominance in the world, but also in its position within the AI race that's going right now with China?
Yeah, I think we should see this as a continuation of this conversation, but also I think it's one of the themes that kind of will show up and come up throughout our conversation, perhaps, is despite the disruption that the Trump administration promises and is putting into effect actually as we speak, right? People are being laid off. Again, people in the White House were working on AI issues. They're not sure that they're even going to have a contract. They're going back to a job or not. So there are issues here. That are real in terms of disruption, but in terms of policy, there may actually be more continuity than not. Now, there would be some changes to the diffusion framework that I was talking about, because, like I said, NVIDIA has criticized it, and a lot of US partners have criticized it. But in issues like this one, for example, this is a perfect example of two things. Number one, of big tech kissing the ring. And what I mean by that is that this particular initiative already started. I mean, these investments are already 2 years in the making. In fact, OpenAI's Sam Altman was already talking about, we are just opening a new data center. Now, why and when did you start building that? That was during the Biden administration. They put together like a fancy kind of conglomerate here called, Stargate. And they have some of the leading kind of like tech companies in the world that are involved. Elon Musk seems to have thrown some shade on the initiative. He seems to think they don't have the funding. He perhaps feels left out, and so he's trying to kind of pull the rug from under it. Probably jealous that Trump is paying attention to them and not to Musk. But that aside, it's clear that these are some of the biggest leading kind of big tech companies, and the final goal, right, of the $500 billion in 4 years and $100 billion initial investment that these companies want to invest in, I think is a very doable one. I want to clarify that this is mostly a private kind of sector investment, and the United States and the US government, in this case, the Trump administration, is going to support them. And again, even here, there's a continuity with what the Biden administration was doing, providing land, providing building permits in a way that would be expedited, right? Going back to what I just said earlier, some of the initiatives that the Biden rather implemented or initiated at the end of his
Sorry for asking,
term.
will these funds be used for the commercial sector, or for maybe will they applied in the military sector as well? Any comment on that?
Well, I mean, AI is dual use, and we do know that whenever big tech companies have collaborated and have projects with the United States, there is always a military component. That is not what this is explicitly about. This is about building data centers. And the promise and the premise is that this will offer hundreds of thousands of jobs, both short term and long term, and will bring, economic kind of like bounty, so to speak, will bring economic riches to the United States, and a lot of jobs. And this is basically what Trump has been doing. So much of this is also a confidence building exercise. You probably saw this in the first days before he even took office. He would line up different tech entrepreneurs coming in. They'll talk about,
Yeah.
I'm going to invest in the United States. And then somebody else would say, I will go and invest in the United States. And that's what this is about as well. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is already underway. It's not like it's new. And very likely these companies were going to do this regardless of which administration was going to be in place. But Trump understands in a way the art of kind of selling a particular project and certain selling an idea. And he has been talking quite a bit about made in America, kind of made in the USA brand. And he wants to repatriate a lot of investments that have been happening elsewhere and bring them back. And it seems like big tech is leading the way in that direction. And so that's kind of where this is. So there is a massive investment like in AI infrastructure. You are going to see, I think, strategic partnerships between big companies. So in this case, it's OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank. But then you have other interested parties in it that have some stake in it. So Microsoft, NVIDIA, and ARM Holdings. They're talking about 100,000 jobs perhaps created as a result of this kind of investment. Of course, these types of investments breed more investments. However, one thing that is completely unsaid in all this and unmentioned here is the environmental
Yeah, that was what
sustainability
I was
impact of
thinking,
this.
right? Yeah. Especially with Trump, because he does not focus too much on that, and he has a lot of discussions about that we need more energy because we need it for the data centers. He had similar
Yeah, I
statements
mean, so the
before,
data
right?
centers, from an environmental kind of sustainability perspective, are a drain on resources manifold. One is mineral extraction. The other one is land use. Third is energy use for training as well as for maintaining those centers. And fourth is cooling. So you need water as well, resources. So now, depending on where you put this, right, you may have bountiful resources around you. And so, like Musk, for example, has pointed that out before, where with SpaceX in Texas, a lot of the things that he needs, including water, those are things that are bountiful where he is. And so you can, in a way, you can make this more sustainable depending what it is. And most of this investment is likely to take place in Texas as well. And so that's where this is. So you can anticipate some of this, but the energy kind of intensity of this is going to be quite high, to the point that we do know already that most of these companies are also asking for small nuclear reactor kind of buildups
Yeah.
or the repurposing existing ones, because those are the energy needs of these of training and
Data
building
center.
these types of
Yeah.
data centers.
Actually, I would like to take the perspective again for the Biden administration.
Sure.
Well, in the basis of the continuity and change, uh, do you believe that there would be a huge and dramatical change towards the Biden administration's technological politics? Because throughout his campaign, Trump said that he has especially revised or revoked the executive order on the artificial intelligence that Biden has been signed.
Yeah.
How do you foresee that? Can you think that the Trump can able to hold this very promise that he made throughout his campaign?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you can guess kind of my answer a little bit. And my answer
Yeah.
is that we're going to see, perhaps in terms of style, a lot of disruption. And specifically when it comes to Executive Order 14110 that you're
Mhm.
referring to, right? This is the White House Executive Order on AI. That was repealed on day one, right? So the Trump administration repealed it, and it's out. It's history. That doesn't mean, however, that the continuity is not there, as I say. And so what I mean by that, well, first of all, there is, with regards to governance especially, in domestically in the United States, a lot of what the so the AI office still exists in the U.S. administration. Now, it's questionable. We'll see how long that is and in what form that will survive. Of course, the Trump administration has also an AI czar, right? A special envoy in a way for AI. But and then Biden, I mean, Trump has just issued another order, I think just yesterday, Thursday the 23rd, on AI, basically directing at the deputy level, creating a task group to review the impact of the previous administration's AI legislation. Most of the concerns from the Trump administration are about censorship, are about this woke ideology. And so to the degree that we're going to see some changes, it's going to be to, what kind of rules, what kind of governance concerns were issued, and the regulations were issued by the previous administration that may have an impact in terms of censorship and in terms of also the way the value set, so to speak, or the values that were built into these kinds of regulatory frameworks, right? And the same kind of exercise is not unique to AI. The same exercise is happening throughout. I just saw that FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has just kind of pulled offline completely their national strategy because the first priority for them was equity rather than, let's say, saving people's lives. And so they're pulling that down and they're going to revisit that. And so there is a big push from the Trump administration to kind of cleanse the U.S. government policies from this what's so-called woke ideology, what they view as woke. Censorship is another one of those. So I think that's where a lot of this driver is. And then, of course, another aspect of that is remember that the executive order, the White House executive order on AI that was repealed, also asked the various private sector companies to reveal the possible harm that their algorithms may cause, right? And if any. And so there was some supervision on the part of, this was still a far cry from, let's say, the EU AI Act, which takes a risk-based approach. It is not as onerous as that. However, right, those things still exist, except for, again, now there is no more need for these companies to actually report to the White House with regards to these potential threats to customers and consumers. Having said that, again, a lot of the work that the AI Safety Institute, in a way, within the United States had to do finished last fall, like November, December. In fact, in anticipation of the Trump administration, they were making sure that was all ramped up. So findings, research, best practices, all that was finalized. In addition to that, you have a lot of agencies that have implemented a lot of those recommendations that are built into them. So the Copyright, right, and Trademark Protection Agency already has a lot of these data protections, copyright protections built into its own rules and regulations. So these have been institutionalized. Of course, they can be clawed back, but it does also mean that they're likely, right, many of them to stay there. Then there is the role of Congress. Congress has passed over 100 laws. Of course, I'm sorry, they have proposed over 100 laws. Many of them have made it to the floor. None of them have passed and have become law. But Congress is very active in this, is very likely will be an important partner of the White House. And then in the United States, you have a federal system. And so you have a lot of states that have already passed regulations. So Colorado has a law that is very similar to the EU AI Act. It's a risk-based approach. California, of course, the most advanced was because that's where Silicon Valley is. Utah and a bunch of Texas, other states in the United States have their own initiatives. And then finally, you have the global governance kind of like models that exist and different rules, the OECD and others. And maybe if I could add an addendum, China, of course, leads the way. The EU has led the way in terms of regulation. So there are also these regional kind of models that exist. And the United States, of course, will pursue its own path, but it cannot be completely, so to speak, insensitive to all of this regulatory framework that already exists in the world and within the United States.
Yeah, Major, like based on all of these discussions, I still had a question. Even
Sure.
from the first, what Biden decided, like the legislation coming from Biden with the separation of tier 1, 2, and 3, and also about like the changes of Trump and his policies. Do you think that, to be clear, do you think that Trump may there be a possibility that he will revise the states between tier 1 and tier 2, for example, like in the coming years, maybe of his administration? And coming also to another question again about TikTok, like we are seeing a difference in policies between Trump and Biden in there. And do you think that like this will negatively or positively impact the rivalry or the competition between the US and China?
Well, I mean, the answer to the last question is very quick. And of course, yes. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
only likely to aggravate the situation. China has found ways to get around some of these limitations, and we do know they do have access, in limited numbers, to U.S. Made advanced cutting edge chips. Um, but of course, that's the whole point of this diffusion framework, is that it's meant to limit it. Let me kind of reiterate. I just wrote down a couple of notes. I just want to make sure that the details here are right. But like I said, so in cases like Turkey's situation, there is Turkish institutions and companies will face right now under the current model that the Biden administration has proposed rather, because it's not law yet. They'll face strict caps on their ability to purchase advanced AI chips, about 50,000 processing units, graphic processing units, about GPUs per country. So the whole country can only have access. However, as I said, even within that kind of like restricted strategic partner kind of situation, nations can double their allocation to 100,000 GPUs by entering into government to government arrangements, as long as they align their policies with US objectives and export controls. So this is industrial policy. This isn't really about AI policy. This is industrial policy about sanctions, tariffs, and other kinds of things. But export clean energy and technology security, right? And then additionally, individual organizations within the countries can apply for enhanced access through what's called the National Verified End User Status. So if you kind of think about this, if you're going through an airport, those of you who have traveled to the United States or other, you can get like a TSA approved kind of status. You get a
Yeah.
green check mark. So you go through a few kind of exercises with the U.S. government. You gain this status as a national verified end user. And then this could go up to about 320,000 advanced GPUs over 2 years, provided you meet the stringent security agreements. Now, having said all that, this was the Biden administration.
Yeah.
And the Trump administration has 120 days to review this, to look at this, and make any changes it wants. Remember, this is an executive order. This is not a U.S. congressional law, which means President Trump can take the whole thing, just tear it and throw it aside, or he can revise it, or he can change the category of states, countries that exist in the different tiers. And so, to get to your first question, of course, it's possible for Turkey to move, let's say, or Israel or another country to move from a restricted category, strategic partner category to a tier 1 kind of category. That will require lobbying on the part of various respective governments. But it is possible. It is also possible that Trump looks at the whole thing and says, no, I don't like it. Let's just do away with it. Remember that NVIDIA and a lot of private sector companies have actually criticized it. They criticize it in real time. When it came out, because they are concerned that faced with these stringent regulations, right, other countries beyond the 18 countries that are in the tier 1.
NVIDIA was one of the first companies that faced these kinds of restrictions for some time now, right? Even before, in terms of chips, if I'm not wrong, right?
Say that again, NVIDIA?
Yeah, NVIDIA was one of the first companies that faced this kind of restrictions long before,
Well,
like
partly
during the
because they are the ones that are producing them. So
yeah,
that's
yeah. So
that's right. Now the interesting interesting thing here is that NVIDIA actually, even though it complains that this will be a problem because then countries may go elsewhere to buy these chips, right? For now, there's nobody else.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody else is producing them. But
Yeah.
let's say but that may create a market, let's say, for China, may create an incentive for China to spend even more money and develop them. Although there's a question of human capital and know-how, right? And having the right technological setup,
Design, yeah.
whether China can even do something like this. But we know that they've been able in the past to breach copyrights and patents from the United States and be able to access that kind of uh, 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 intellectual property and then
Information.
be able to produce them. But Nvidia also does not have right now a surplus of chips. It's selling everything that it's producing, but
Yes.
it's in principle it does not like the idea that it has to wait, or rather that there is some limit in competition. But again, Trump may decide that, say, you know what, this is not the right framework. We're going to do this completely differently, and maybe we'll have only two tiers. NATO allies
Yeah.
versus non-NATO allies, and then go that direction. But this remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, since we are speaking about Trump, actually, I also would like to mention about the situation of the private sector. As you said, so actually there must be many challenges and many changes compared to the Biden's administration's executive orders. But speaking for the private sector, actually, we seen that the most of the private corporates, they backed up Trump throughout their campaign, throughout his campaign, compared to the first term of Trump. So especially like Elon Musk emerged as a very quite influential figure for the Trump second administration, to be honest. And as we have spoken about the $5 billion investment for the AI technologies, Trump made that announcement, and then Elon Musk made another announcement to his X account that claiming contrary assumptions about that kind of investment. Anyways, how they think that how do you evaluate the relationship between the tech industry and Trump administration will be for the next 4 years, especially
Yeah.
since we spoken about Elon Musk. How do you perceive the Doge? Yeah, that is right.
Doge.
Yeah,
Doge.
The
Doge. Yeah, the Doge department's influence on the innovation and the cutting edge technologies. Would it be have a difference?
Yeah, I was paying attention at the inauguration, when Trump, took the oath of office. And I was trying to remember 8 years earlier, during his first time around in the inauguration. And if you paid attention to the people that were surrounding Trump at the time, a lot of them were from a military background. Trump really liked his generals.
But he
Uh,
fired most of them half of the way.
exactly. And so within a year to two, all of them were gone. And the ones that were left, they had a falling out once Trump left because of January 6th and all kinds of things, including his chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? But I say this because Trump seems to me to jump from tree to tree. So the first term was the generals in charge, and the second term is the tech bros in charge. And at this time, he seems to be enamored with all of them, partly because I think rightly so. And there's, we can criticize Trump for a lot of things, but one of the things that he has a particular awareness of where the public kind of, and this also comes up with a TikTok conversation, but where the public preferences are. And it's clear that the future and economic development in the United States depends on its technological prowess. And so he's making, I think, the right bet here. The concern, of course, is that I'm going to say this as politely as I can. The people that are around him are some of the brightest, smartest, intelligent people, but they also lack certain, let's say, emotional and empathetic qualities. And that starts with Trump, of course, but also a lot of people in Silicon Valley, right? Sorry, I meant Musk earlier. And actually, Musk is the most human-centric of all of them. Maybe a reminder here that there was a big exchange between Musk and Sergey Brin a few years ago, where Musk was accused of being a speciesist by Sergey Brin, who is one of the founders of Google, because Musk favored the survival of humanity rather than
Oh, yeah.
actually
Yeah, yeah,
new,
yeah, yeah, I remember that.
excuse me, rather than new artificial, like super intelligent, kind of artificial intelligence. And so Musk, of all these people, is the most empathetic to the human race. And so that
So
is a
imagine.
big source of concern when you think about the people that Trump has around him. Now, again, why did Trump and why did these people come around Trump? If you had looked at most of these people in 2016, most of them would have voted for Hillary Clinton, and that includes Elon Musk himself. But there was a big change in 2020. The change was twofold. One had to do with the rhetoric in the United States around woke, DEI, and at least these people think of themselves as very much on the libertarian spectrum rather than on the more government regulation spectrum, and especially when it comes to censorship of speech. Was the thing that kind of triggered Musk. And it seems that Mark Zuckerberg has belatedly seen the light as well,
Right.
because he went and I think he was on Joe Rogan saying, "Oh, but it was the White House that made us do it. We wanted to not censor." And what was exactly that they didn't want to censor? That's the second part. So one is DI woke, kind of like rhetoric. The other one, it has to do with COVID, right? A lot of these individuals seem to have been radicalized is too strong of a term, but seem to have turned against especially Democratic Party politics and establishment, and in favor of more kind of, again, this libertarian terror. So this is where you have people like, again, Musk, who would have been maybe 8 years ago Democrats, that jumped ship and went on the other side. You have other people in social media, like the media world, like Joe Rogan, for example, that also made that transition. And then you have people like RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard that were Democrats and now are firmly within the MAGA
Trump.
camp. And so that's, I think I would say that part of the reason why you have these tech bros around them is because it's fear of ever increasing regulation, as well as the politics within the United States that kind of came to a head during COVID. Fear of censorship, right, of media, information, technology, and others. But again, not all of them see it the exact same way. Remember that Google, their first prototype of their LLM was Gemini, and it was ridiculed for being too woke, right? Because it
Yes.
couldn't get the gender and the race of the founding fathers right, because the algorithm was set up in a way that reflected rightly a more diverse society, but wrongly in the past it revisited something that was inaccurate. And so we are in this brave new world, I think, and everybody, of course, recognizes that Trump is here to stay. They recognize that even if Trump exits stage left, let's say in 4 years, that Trumpism will remain as an enduring force in American politics. And so they understand that. They see the writing on the wall. And so they are lining up to support him.
Yeah, sometimes when I think about this, like we mentioned the military background of the previous people around Trump, and now like we have this tech sector in there. So sometimes I ask myself, like, will we see at some point divergency between between Trump and them? Like, and I'm somehow confused because the other group here, the tech guys in here, are a little bit powerful, even more, maybe more powerful than the military in there, and so it's a very interesting thing that we need to see and to closely consider during these 4 years, right?
I think that you're right. There is a difference between somebody who basically has been a government employee their whole life, in the military in particular, and so they're limited by those the institutions, so to speak, in which they serve, versus the tech kind of like sector, where all of these are fabulously wealthy, completely independent, of course, subject to government regulations and the whims sometimes of the administration, so they have to play the game the right way. However, they are independent. I do have a running bet with colleagues of mine that the Musk-Trump bromance will last maybe 6 months to a year. If you look at Musk's kind of past, wherever he has been, PayPal, even with OpenAI, was one of the early investors.
Yeah.
With Tesla, everywhere he's been, he just cannot be number two, or he cannot share the stage with somebody else. Trump is very much the same way. And so, by the way, notice that Doge, there were two, which is kind of ironic because for a government efficiency department, you had two people running it instead of one. So I
Yeah.
thought, one of my students pointed that out, and I thought that was actually a very astute observation. But notice that Vivek Ramaswamy no longer is involved with Doge. It's just Musk now running the show. Vivek has just stepped aside 2 days ago, I think, because he will be running for governor of Ohio. And of course,
A coincidence or?
I imagine that Musk had absolutely nothing to do with any of this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Yeah, truly, there's a pattern here. Yeah.
Metiver, it is a very nice conversation, and there's a lot of topics and issues that we can discuss here. However, we have to finish our conversation in here, to end our conversation in here. But before that, we have a question that we do to all of our people who join here the program, and like it's something a personal note, to tell the truth, and because like most of our audience are comes from the youth in Turkey. So do you have any suggestion to them, to these people who are very eager to explore and to engage with emerging technologies? Like,
Yeah.
is there something that you can share with them?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I teach a senior research seminar on AI and governance. And we just last week discussed, or rather this week, we discussed the importance of AI literacy. And what I mean by AI literacy is not knowing how to code, although that is important, or learning kind of the technical aspects of machine learning or, neural language processing works. That is important. That's an important aspect of AI literacy. But even a even more important aspect of AI literacy is the ethics and the values that surround that. And so I would suggest, I'm a social scientist, and so my main kind of emphasis would be to develop critical thinking skills, because in an age of AI, where a lot of processes and even education, the future of work is uncertain, the one skill that is likely to survive the upheaval is a skill of critical thinking. And so develop a literacy in AI, but also develop literacy in humanities, in social sciences, develop the ability to think critically, to write well so you can distinguish, and also to be able, because we are going to have this information deluge, and much of it from untrusted sources. So develop the ability to distinguish between truthful information, have points of reference. I wrote a piece actually just about a few months ago, where I was talking about, and the economists had something similar that kind of triggered me a little bit, and that's why I wrote what I did. But the importance of trust in an age of kind of like AI misinformation, disinformation. It used to be that because of the internet revolution, we no longer in a way needed institutions, right? We didn't need universities and governments and to tell us what to do, because all the information was online. And so institutions, in a way, and trust institutions eroded because there's no need for them. However, in the age of AI, given the fact that so much information may be wrong, may be partial, may be maliciously, right, misrepresented, we need now those trust institutions again. Now, it may not be the exact same institutions, but we do need trusted institutions. And so there's a kind of like a burden on institutions to make themselves relevant again, but also for us as individuals, we need to have points of references that we can trust, and that we can go to, and that we know that in fact this will be good and trustworthy information.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Medher.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we've come to the end of our episode of Seda Tech Talks, and we were very glad to have Medler here today with us and to talk such an important issue, not only just for the US, but for the whole world, I would say, for Turkey as well, but also for what's going on in the world right now. We are very glad that you are with us here today, that you were with us here today, and we look forward to be together in the following episodes of Seda Tech Talks. Have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeleine, for being here
Thank you.
today. And we also would like to thank to our audience that's being here today and listening to us. And hope to see you with the next episode of the Sense Tech Talks. We wish you a lovely evening. Thank you.